Save on O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner. Get 2 cans of O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner for just $8. Valid in-store only at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
The 3 Down Greencast is brought to you by the Pile of Bones Brewing Company. Home delivery now available in Regina at sassbeerdelivery.ca. Welcome to the 3 Down Greencast. You are listening to the internet's only XCFL, CXFL podcast? Something? I don't know. Yes, if you haven't heard the news today, of course, lots to talk about on this edition of the Greencast, which we were planning to record this evening regardless.
We have the receipts. We have the text to prove it.
Yes, there was plans to record an episode this evening, and by some miraculous coincidence, the CFL decided to drop the bombshell of the offseason, or at least seemingly the bombshell of the offseason on this day, which we are, of course, very grateful for. That is, of course, they are going to talking with the XFL. So what this is, what this means, where this could be headed, we're going to get into all of that in a little bit, so don't you worry. That's, of course, the big conversation. Not that our opinion really matters or sways anything involved with this, but
I feel like Joel, for like the first time on anything big, we might be first to market.
I don't know about that. I'm not going to go that far. But
well, compared to the other CFL podcast, maybe.
Well, I'm not going to put any guarantees on that, nor does it really matter, quite frankly. But there's certainly plenty of different angles, lots there to get to that as well. We're also going to touch on the vaccination schedule. Premier Scott Moe here in Saskatchewan sort of updated an approximate timeline of where he expects different age groups to start getting vaccinated and what that could mean for the CFL 2021 season, which despite everything that went on with the XFL today, the CFL continues to say they are planning to carry on with the 2021 season no matter where these XFL talks go. So that's of course sort of the other big thing going on in the CFL right now is, well, will they play, and when will they play, and what will it look like, and what's holding them back, and all that fun stuff.
Right, of course.
Yeah, but before we get to all that, we'd be remiss if we did not discuss some sad news that occurred in the CFL circles last week, as of course the passing of a former Argonauts offensive lineman and longtime CFL on TSN analyst Chris Schultz. Died on Thursday, March 4th, suddenly of a heart attack at 61. Just sent shockwaves across this country, especially after we were still kind of dealing with the passing of Walter Gretzky as well. So obviously thoughts to family and friends, colleagues, everyone who knew both of these fine gentlemen who were a huge part of the Canadian sports scene, obviously in very different sports, but nonetheless, just a completely shocking news to wake up to, quite frankly, on Thursday morning that you never really thought was going to happen. I can't say that I really knew Chris at all. I may have met him once at a Grey Cup or two, especially when I was more so on the road back in the days doing that with CJME, but it doesn't come to mind what I did. But I will say this, I think there are a lot of times when someone passes away, a lot of people kind of say nice things to be nice. In the case of Chris Schultz, it's pretty obvious that it wasn't just because someone died. The amount of outpouring and very specific types of outpouring and specific types of storytelling told me that this was a man that was clearly very beloved by everyone who knew him.
Oh, certainly. I did have a chance to meet him once at one of those TSN fan experiences they were doing at the 2011 Grey Cup. I was there with Travis Curra, and I'll never forget a couple of things. One, the lineup, I remember, they had like this sports center desk you could get your photo taken at. It was kind of a cool setup. They were broadcasting live from there. I remember the line moving so slowly, and I'm like, well, why is this line moving so damn slowly? Like, this is just like, what's going on here? What kind of a mess is this? And then as you came around the corner and you could see Chris Schultz and hear him conversing with all the CFL fans, well, the reason the line was moving so slow was Chris wasn't just get in, photo op, done. He was cracking jokes. He was, poking fun at buddies. He was asking your story. He was getting to know you. He was just genuinely interested in everybody that was there. And I remember, you get a little starstruck, especially I was out of the media at the time. So you find a way to kind of damper that. But get a little starstruck, and I'm there in my bomber getup, and Kura's there in his rider getup, and Schultz just loved that. I remember the man had like the biggest hands I've ever seen in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was like I was a baby shaking his hand, and same as everybody else. He talked with me and Kura like, we were old buddies, like we were good friends, and he probably spent a good 10 minutes BSing with us and brought us in for a picture, and that's the kind of guy he was. And you read some of the stories, and the one that I think speaks to who Chris Schultz was actually one shared by Jamie Nye. Mm-hmm. Jamie interned at TSN, and you and I have run into a handful of sports media personalities that forget what brought them there, if you will. Mm-hmm. And if you read what Jamie wrote and talked about, from day one, he was a TSN intern, and Schultz was talking football like him, like he was, the producer or a big anchor or something like that. So it's just, just a class act. I loved him on TV, and I'm glad that I got a chance to meet him.
Yeah, absolutely. So this coming Saturday, March 13th, you will be able to watch the funeral if you so choose. On YouTube, you can find the link at 3downnation.com to search for the story that says funeral service for Chris Schultz to be live streamed. So you'll be able to check that out if that's something you're interested in. If you're not, that's fine as well. But also, if this is something that's kind of taken off on Twitter and online a little bit, and it's something that has become sort of the move for the whole family right now, is if you would like to make a donation to Purelator Tackle Hunger in Schultz's honor, the family would sincerely appreciate the gesture. As of course, that was a cause that Chris Schultz was very closely tied to in his time with CFL and TSN when he was on, I assume the whole time, but essentially when he was also especially on television, he spearheaded that amazing fundraiser for local food banks every year.
Absolutely.
So before we get into the fun part of this episode, I guess we'll raise one to your old friend Chris Schultz. And yes. John, what's in the glass this week?
Well, you had been teasing me, Joel, with photos. Mm-hmm. Occasionally, you'd send me this sexy, sexy photo. And I'm not talking about your legs. I'm talking about Pile of Bones' new Prairie Pills. You kept telling me this is an outstanding Pilsner, maybe the best I've ever had, and I couldn't find it here in Saskatoon for the longest time. So as I walk into the walk-in cooler at the Sobeys liquor store in Stonebridge, I took a turn to my right, and I saw there, like the golden ticket in Willy Wonka, the skies opened up, you could hear the angels sing, ah, and there it was. 4 delicious golden Prairie Pills. And Joel, you did not lead me astray, my friend.
I would never lie to you about something like that.
No. And you know my beer taste profile well enough that, you think Pilsner, especially in these parts, you think that Slue water that comes with the green can. You think, if you're from Manitoba, you think of Labatt Blue. And to a much less offensive taste, Great West's Pill, which is okay. But this is great. Mm-hmm. This is the best Pilsner I've had in my life. It's got that little bit of Pilsner bite to it without being skunky or awful, and it is tremendous.
Yes, I remember. I think it was the day before it was actually released. I happened to be at Pile of Bones, yes, and I was given a little sample of it straight out of the tank, and instantly I was like, "Oh my god." I'm going to drink like 11 billion of these.
I think what it reminds me of is, I've never done a brewery tour outside of the Steam Whistle tour a couple times in Toronto. Mm-hmm. And Steam Whistle and it's funny, it triggered my memory. Steam Whistle does let you on the tour take it right out of the tank.
Yeah.
And it is probably the crispest, freshest thing that you'll taste.
Yeah, like Steam Whistle is one of those beers that there's nothing special about it. It's good, it's fine. But when you do have it fresh at the brewery in downtown Toronto, it is a lot better than where you will find it anywhere else.
Oh, 100%. I would never go out and buy it myself, but
no.
If you've had that, and I think a lot of people have, if you've done that downtown Toronto brewery tour, mm-hmm. And you're looking for that crisp, clean, like perfect Pilsner taste, this is it. Pile of Bones has nailed it. And I don't just say that because they sponsor our podcast.
No, and what's really cool about that beer specifically is it is made entirely of Saskatchewan products. The The hops come from JGL Farms out of Moosomin, and the malt comes from Maker's Malt out of Saskatchewan, Rosthern, I believe, and of course everything else, water, all that, Regina. So yeah, just completely made of Prairie products, just absolutely nailed perfectly, and just, yeah, if you are into Pilsners, or even if you're not, if you're just into beer and you will like a beer that tastes like beer, this is the one that you need to get for sure. For me, I pre-ordered the Pink Boots Solo Crush from Rebellion.
Yes.
You may have seen that one out and about. This is the annual beer that they started doing for the YWCA in coordination with International Women's Day. This year it was released, so a little bit of a smaller event. Usually the entire Lady Rebels Club gets together and brews the beer for that cause. This year, obviously, for COVID reasons, that didn't quite happen in its entirety. I know their head brewmaster, Vanessa, brewed the beer, and I believe sales associate extraordinaire Stephanie was there supervising, so there was at least a couple of them there. But other than that, there was more of a scaled-back event. Last year, they did like the Blood Orange Ginger beer that was really good. I don't know if you ever happened to try that one.
I didn't, but I remember you saying lots of good things about it.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, this year it's part of their Solo Crush series. If you haven't seen from Rebellion, it's basically a single hop, hazy-ish kind of pale ale that they've been releasing with different hops. This one is with what is known as the Pink Boots hops. Not local hops, but still pretty good nonetheless. For as hazy as it looks, it's not. It's a lot drier. It's not super juicy. It's a little bitter. So I actually quite like it. And it warms up pretty nice too, if I have to say so myself. So if you're looking kind of for like a drier, not as juicy, hazier kind of pale ale, if you're kind of over the juice bombs a little bit, if you like it a little bit on the drier end, this would definitely be one for you.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to have to... are they shipping that up to Saskatoon, Gas?
I believe there's been shipments made across various places now, yeah.
Fantastic. I will also have to go into the walk-in cooler at the Sobeys liquor store and, again, wait for the Angels to sing.
Mm-hmm. The Angels were not singing today, for some people on Twitter.com. As
it was such a bad place.
It was bad, but it was good. It was just a weird day. There was basically the CFL came out today. Well, first of all, it started with the Montreal Alouettes weirdly posting a post about the CFL talking with the XFL, quoting in it that, as you saw in the CFL release, and we're all like, huh? What CFL release? And then, of course, that sent off alarm bells everywhere, so maybe that ended up pushing the timeline up on this news a little bit today. But regardless, yes, of course, the CFL and the XFL have decided that they're going to discuss business synergy and other buzzwords that people like to use in business.
Are they going to circle back to it? Are they going to have meetings to discuss the potential of having more meetings about the meeting and then do a PowerPoint on it?
I assume so. Those may have already been happening because apparently there have kind of been some informal talks for a little while now. But anyway, it does seem like some kind of relationship could be coming, might not, who knows, between the CFL and the XFL. And I think it was made pretty clear. You can go to 3downnation.com and find the 3 Down Nation podcast. Justin Dunk had about a 12-minute interview with Commissioner Randy Ambrosie on the subject. And basically, if you listen to that, you get the idea that they're just talking at this point. This is kind of just exploratory talks to see where this could or could not go. We'll get into it in a second. Of course, ultimately, CFL Twitter, many went crazy with this, thinking the XFL was buying out the CFL, which with 9 ownership groups, including 3 local ownership groups, would probably be a logistical nightmare that I'm sure no one wants to figure out. Or there'll be some kind of merger, which we'll also talk about. I don't think it's beneficial for either side. But regardless, yeah, it just seems like they're just... And this is what I will say about this. We're at this point. There's a lot of people saying, well, there isn't much to talk about at this point. Why talk about this? Why even say anything?
That's me. That's what I'm going to say.
Why even say anything with... If you don't know where this is going yet, why say anything at all? And I think there's some positive developments here, at least in terms of the transparency that we're talking about in terms of the CFL, which is something that hasn't always been their strong suit.
Right.
Because it seems like whether they announced it today or not, these talks were going to go on at some point or another. And I think it's a lot better in the league's eyes, because there had been apparently, we had received some messages of 3 Down Nation from some random accounts that no one had ever heard of about potential mergers or something. And there's a article on XFL News Hub as well, as their reporter Mike Mitchell had kind of heard the same sort of talk of potential talks between the CFL and the XFL, but he just kind of brushed it off as nothing as well. So it seemed like if these talks continued to progress down some kind of line, at some point or another, something was going to be leaked about this. And if all of a sudden, say 2 months down the road, there's, Justin Dunk reporting that for the last 6 months, the CFL and the XFL have been talking, all of a sudden alarm bells are going to go off.
Right.
And instead, the CFL has decided, to their credit, even though there wasn't a lot of details today, and maybe there isn't a lot of details to talk about, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt on this one, that there isn't a lot of details to talk about yet. They could be lying to our face. It's entirely possible. But I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt a little bit here and give them partial credit for at least acknowledging that these talks are happening. So whatever this leads to, if it leads to anything, it doesn't seem like it's been done in some shady backroom deal that has everyone in a panic when all of a sudden the news starts to break a little bit down the road.
And here's my theory. I don't think I'm with you. It's good they're getting out front of it before, the dunk bomb of all dunk bombs is released 3 months from now, or somebody at ESPN leaks it or something. There's a lot of years around. Now, the one thing I did notice from reading Ambrosie with many others and listening to him and our boy Justin Dunk is he was very robotic.
Well, that's how he is about everything.
I know, but even more so, it was almost like he was prepared to not say anything because he's trying to keep a secret. Now, I'm not sitting here.
He's always prepared to say nothing, though. That's his media style. He often sounds like he's saying something, but says absolutely nothing at all.
Yeah, he is good at that. But this time it was like he didn't do the news conference. He went out to separate interviews, and normally one thing he has done is cracked a little bit sometimes to a Danny Austin, a Justin Dunk, and kind of tips his hand so slightly. So I'm not going full tinfoil hat that anybody's merging. I think that's absurd. I'm with you. I don't think it's beneficial for anybody, but I think that they're deeper along in some sort of partnership than they say they are today. They
very well might be.
Randy Ambrosie's going on and saying, we're talking about baking a cake. We're not baking the cake. We're not decorating the cake. We're talking about baking a cake. I think here's my theory.
I want cake.
So do I. Yeah. Listen to make sure you got some sweets or donuts or something to nullify your sweet tooth when you listen to Ambrosie and Dunk. That's for sure. Here's what I think is going on. I think somebody reached out to somebody for advice. The XFL, we praise the broadcast, the transparency. Mm-hmm. When it was here, we both thoroughly enjoyed it.
I believe I messaged when I messaged friend of the show Dan Plaster of CBC about this today. I was like, I feel weird that my two misunderstood loves are potentially going to work together. All I need now is for somehow college football teams to get involved in this triangle, and it would just be like perfection for me.
You'll just have a seizure. Jenny will have to come. Mo will be barking as you're just down on the floor, just passed out, frothing from the mouth. So I think at some point there's probably a conversation like, hey, you guys have captured the demo we so desperately need. And they're like, hey, you guys have run a football league for 100 years without going bankrupt twice. And I almost wonder, and I really think this is all just Fraser takes and my theory, mm-hmm. that they started realizing in that conversation that, holy shit, we got a lot of similarities. Yeah. We have a lot of things that would work well together. And I think what started, because I think the tip a little bit is, we just kind of started talking and started getting along. So, well, if that was the case, you wouldn't keep doing it, right? I akin it to our friendship. At first it was just a couple Twitter DMs about, stuff at practice that eventually led to texting and talking basically every single day and then doing a podcast together, right? Mm-hmm. I think at some point they realized, hey, this is cool. This is good. We're talking about lots of good things. We're making good headway. Maybe we should start putting this stuff down. So I think it's deeper than talking about baking a cake. To me, to use Ambrosie's terms, I think they have started baking the cake.
They've at least rounded up the ingredients.
Exactly. They're deciding whether it's going to be chocolate or vanilla or carrot or whatever. They're said, okay, we're going to bake this cake. Let's just figure it out because we have a lot in common. And I think, when you look at logistics, and to me, looking at the logistics of a couple of things, one, they're going to be competing for the same player pool. You're competing. There's nowhere else for guys who are maybe NFL caliber, but maybe undersized or maybe a step too slow or maybe just got passed over, right? There's the whole market is going to be your two leagues, so why fight each other? And I'm not saying it's in a cruel, colluding, drive salaries down kind of way, but find a way to work together on players because you're essentially recruiting the same player, and nobody gives them credit for it. But look at every spring football league that's tried to start. The CFL has basically been a part, not publicly, of killing them all. If these leagues could have offered something better than what the CFL offers, the CFL may be the one taking the lumps rather than the USFL, the XFL 1.0, XFL 2.0, as we move into XFL 3.0. So I think it's good vision that the owners of the XFL went, okay, these guys kill us. Let's find a way to work together. And I don't think people in CFL circles give the CFL enough credit for that.
Yeah, I think there's some people out there wondering, well, what does the XFL get out of this? And I think there's a certain, and if you talk in football circles, as much as there are people in this country that love to shit all over the CFL, if you talk to people in football circles, even in the United States, there is respect for the Canadian Football League and what it does and what it's been able to do. So even though The Rock played college football and he played in he went to a training camp in the CFL and he has a football background, he doesn't have experience running a football league. I don't know the backgrounds of the other guys the rest of the group quite so much, but I assume they haven't run a football league because there hasn't been many of them. So the fact remains that, yes, there are things that the XFL can learn from the CFL simply just to exist long term. Right. Which seems weird, but that's like goal number one now of any of these leagues that should be popping up in the US of, well, number one thing we need to do is exist for a while for a change, which is something that they can learn to do from the CFL. So I think there is something there. Where people need to calm down a little bit, and we're getting this now, is the idea of a potential merger or a buyout or something one way or the other. And I don't see this as a beneficial move for anybody. I think for the CFL, it's pretty obvious that the XFL provides some opportunities to learn some things, marketing, business. These guys obviously have business acumen and all that, and there's a lot of different things we're going to talk about in a minute of what the CFL can learn from this. But I don't think, forming an American division within, some kind of umbrella company of these two leagues that exist under basically 10 ownership groups, I don't see it working long term for the CFL. We've tried to play games sort of under the same umbrella in the United States, and unless you pick very specific markets, I don't think it's going to work. Right. And from an XFL perspective, there's no real benefit to them, and this is, I think, where people were worried, is because the XFL, obviously, their owners have a lot of money, and you would think they would come in and they're maybe trying to squash competition or do whatever they're trying to do. I don't think there's really a benefit to them essentially merging with or trying to buy out the CFL, as much as some people may want that. There are some people out there who think that, but just because ultimately what in the United States, especially when you're talking about professional sports, and it's obviously always on very different scales, the ultimate goal now is not sell thousands of tickets. It's not do all this, sponsorship deals. The holy grail of sports, especially in the United States right now, and it's picking up again thanks to add-on streaming rights, is the television deal. We've seen it recently. I mean, the NFL is the master of this, and no one's going to be the NFL. They just got CBS and Fox to double their broadcast payments with the same number of games. They're going from $1 billion a year to $2 billion a year to continue their Sunday afternoon packages. Yep. NBC is re-upped for a good chunk of money, and so has ABC to add in the Super Bowl. They pay more out of everyone, but everyone's in that $2 billion a year range. And now even there's word that the NHL, which has long lagged behind the other leagues when it comes to TV money in the United States, is now going to get double what they were previously getting just from NBC, just from ESPN. And they are still said to be having another television partner coming. So the NHL's money is suddenly about to explode as well. So ultimately, and this was the goal of XFL 2.0, it was blatantly obvious, they got on TV to try to basically prove do a proof of concept and eventually land some degree of a television money. I don't know what sort of their high-end expectation of was, is if this really took off, what could we get in terms of TV money? Is it $100 million a year or something? I don't know what the number is. Whatever it is, that's what they're going for. And You would have to assume, especially in a post-COVID world where we don't know what fan attendance is going to look like. The XFL attendance outside of a couple of places was never super strong to begin with. So their goal is still probably going to be to land that TV contract. And as much as we love the CFL up here, and you see it in every other sport, Canadian teams on American television do not draw ratings and will not make money for networks. So
no, they don't. Not at all.
There is no benefit whatsoever to the XFL merging in some official capacity with the CFL to bring their teams under the same umbrella and force games between the Red Blacks and the Riders on American television. There's just no point. Or even the Red Blacks playing, the Roughnecks, isn't going to draw as well as two American teams playing. So there's just no point to it.
No, and you're absolutely right. And that's what it's funny. I'm usually the king of bad takes. I wanted to come on here and try to make the argument that it could happen, and I'm trying to play devil's advocate, but god damn it, Gass, you thought it out was good. I can't I haven't told you before, I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'll come over the top and say this was a great idea and just stir the pot. I'm like, that makes way too much sense to ever happen. So I'm with you. You won't see it happening. This is about both leagues trying to figure out, you touched on it, it's the new revenue streams in the post-COVID world.
Yeah. And as much as, again, not to hark on some CFL fans too much, they hold the CFL in high regard, and there's a lot of them, I think, there's maybe a bit of a wake-up call in here as well in terms of what the XFL was, and I know a lot of people like to make fun of their business models in the past and how they failed. Still ultimately, in the grand scheme of the football world, when we're just talking purely from a business perspective, compared to, the NFL is the leader, and then you kind of have the CFL and the XFL in that same range, and this has to do with player pools, coaching pools, money pools that are available to them, that whole thing. So the idea that they work together isn't the most outlandish idea, because if they suddenly just start going to war against each other and trying to outbid and try to do this or that, no one's probably going to win, and then nobody comes out ahead, and then what are you left with? Nothing.
Well, and I think the unique opportunity is finally here for year-round professional football. And I think that would be something that would work for both leagues, that would work for the players especially, but, the XFL season they always intended to be a spring league, which would be, out of the way by the time you get into the CFL season, and then you have the NFL come the fall, right? So I think if they keep that agreement, I think that should be part of anything going forward, saying, let's not run concurrent to each other. I think that'd be huge. Cross-promote, but let's not run concurrent. And, me having a lacrosse background, what a lot of guys do, they play in the NLL, they play in basically the NLL is a winter season into spring. Then they go play in the summer, they go play pro outdoor, they go play, senior men's where they don't get paid, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So guys have an opportunity to play year round. Now, this isn't me saying that you're going to see Bo Levi Mitchell playing for, the Dallas Extreme while also playing for the Calgary Stampeders.
Dallas Renegades, but yeah.
Right. Sorry, I couldn't remember my CFL. I knew you'd do it. But what I do see is an opportunity here for that guy that makes camp in the CFL, has a really good rookie season, but only makes his 60 grand Canadian. Well, dude's got bills to pay. I think some sort of player agreement that, if you're in your first X years, you have the option to go play in the XFL, right? What's the ultimate goal of these guys is to get to the NFL. and giving them a pathway where, hey, you make a splash in one league, you can go play in the other league and try to build your brand and get more tape and just decide what you want to do. I think that'd be beneficial for everybody, right? Like,
yep.
And two, and there again comes the cross promotion. Like, you get a guy. Oh God, I'm drawing blanks. It's been so long since we saw CFL football. Like, I really am. But like, I'm trying to think of guys that like have a really good, like, especially American players come up, boom, great couple years. They don't have enough film. They can't get the crack in the NFL. Well, at least that guy should have the option to, make 60 grand Canadian, then 40 grand American playing the sport he loves. Is it going to be hard on the body? Abso-friggin-lutely. I am not denying that for a second. Does it mean the player shouldn't have a choice for something like that? I think they absolutely should. And let's face it, thinking of it today as well, one part where, there's almost universal hate is for CFL officials.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now, if there's a partnership there, maybe now these guys can go full-time reffing. You go from reffing 18 games a year to 28 or 30, whatever it is. Maybe again, these guys can start making a living, with football. I think that's great for everybody. If you come up with this formal partnership, you're right. I think it's pure conspiracy theory, and everybody's saying, this is the death of the 3-down game. It's going to die. Fuck off. Give your head a shake. Like, it's not. It's fine. We have a great product. They've been a football league. They just survived COVID. There's one other football league in the world that survived COVID. The NFL, and as you said, they just came out of it with $2 billion more from everybody. So, obviously, as much as we give them shit, because they do a lot of things wrong, they know what they're doing on the football ops side, how to keep a game and a league alive. And people, especially in this own country, do not give them enough credit for that. And I don't. And you know me, I'm the first one to rip on the league when the league does something stupid, because the league, again, does a lot of stupid shit.
Mm-hmm. It basically cost you interviews with the commissioner on your old podcast.
What can I say? That also commissioner was scared of, that old commissioner was also scared of everybody, right? And that, in fairness, they wanted questions in advance, and I said, you don't get questions in advance. No. So I even said you can talk topics. I don't prepare questions. I haven't prepared a question since day one of my broadcasting career. Now, again, part of that is just sitting in scrums where I could just, depend on you asking the questions, but that's a different thing.
Well, it's funny that you bring up things like officiating, because if you also head to 3downnation.com, John Hodge wrote up a good piece where he spoke with Bombers president Wade Miller, and it's a little more enlightening than what we got from the commissioner. There's a decent amount of information there, and the one quote that stands out, he says, quote, and I quote, "Right now it's an exchange of ideas about the game, marketing, officiating, and our business. We just need to wait and see. I think what today is about is just being transparent with their fans and let them know that we're having these discussions." So it's funny that you bring it up, because I don't think a lot of people have thought about it from an officiating perspective, and that's one that makes sense, where these leagues can work together to make their officiating better as well, which is always important. And, in a game that's always getting faster and more difficult to officiate, if these leagues can work together in some way there. Now, I think ultimately for the CFL, we've talked about, the XFL and how they can benefit from just learning how to exist by working with the CFL. And I think there's, sort of boring stuff that works for everyone on another level here. And it's, I want to give proper credit here. The tweets come from Danny Austin of Post Media, where, he basically talks about just business in our time in 2021. He says, basically everything in business now comes down to customer data. And, it's not a very interesting thing to talk about, but, they can understand, they can start to learn things about each other's fan bases, about each other's customers, so the CFL can provide data on retaining audience, and, the XFL, which they haven't been able to do. The XFL builds its audience from scratch and adding new fans, and that's a way the CFL can learn how to new fans. So there's this boring stuff behind the scenes that they can certainly learn about that no one's probably going to pick up on, and you would never notice. Right. So I think that's where this can go for the CFL is sort of that kind of thing. And this, to me, we've kind of harped on the CFL for a while about their need to evolve as a business. Yeah. And I think this is an opportunity, and the commissioner and whoever else is behind this deserves credit for opening these discussions and having these discussions with another entity that is kind of similar to them in some ways to see how they can evolve their business. And for me, ultimately, selfishly, if at the end of the day, from a business perspective, this moves the CFL off, sort of being run by football ops for the last 20 years or so, or maybe through its entire existence, and is run more by business people who see things from a fan angle and focus on things like entertainment and gambling and so on and so forth, that would be a really good thing for this league. And, side note, that would also probably force the CFL and its teams and its coaches to be a little more forthright when it comes to things like depth charts and injuries and all that kind of stuff that I think most people would enjoy being able to know that kind of information, especially if, say, through these conversations, the league really learns to take on gambling, and if there's some kind of co-agreement where each side kind of works together to help each other in that regard, it would be beneficial of the league to make sure that the proper information is out there, so even sort of Americans who don't really follow the CFL all of a sudden have a pretty good handle on how to gamble on it.
Right, because people will gamble on anything, because, again, more proof that the Fraser curse is real. I quickly lost $25 gambling on the Briar. And there's another thing too, Joel, that we are all forgetting. And it's funny, I've got SportsCenter on mute here as you and I are recording this, and we've gone a long way in this podcast without just thinking about. We've talked about the partnerships and everything, and growing the brand. Well, part of the brand of the XFL, and it's funny, they keep going from showing Randy Ambrosie, who I can almost certainly guarantee you in his Zoom meeting here with, Rod Smith of the CFL and TSN, he's not wearing dress pants. That man is a dress shirt and shorts kind of guy. I guarantee you.
And I'll give him credit for that.
But they keep shooting and cutting to The Rock. Mm-hmm. The XFL, even if just the star power alone that, hey, can we borrow The Rock every third weekend to grow the game? Like, that just seems like imagine, now close your eyes, Joel. Mm-hmm. You walk into New Mosaic. The lights go out. And you hear, can you smell what The Rock is cooking? That'd be rad.
Yeah, and I mean, there's no doubting his reach and his business potential because of that. So certainly, if The Rock is suddenly mentioning the CFL every once in a while, that's good for business. There's no question about that.
No love for my Rock. No love for the Smella. Thought it was pretty good.
I don't think he's ever done it that long, though.
That's fair. I kind of gave myself a head buzz from the oxygen I lost there, so got to give me a minute to recover here. I'll be fine in a minute.
Okay,
I'm good now. I'm good.
So, where this is going and what this means, we don't really know just quite yet. It's basically all speculation. We assume
but it's fun.
It's fun, and it very well could lead to nothing. These two sides could eventually agree that nothing's going to come of this, and people got angry over nothing. But regardless, it seems like something is probably going to come of this. What is interesting, though, is Randy Ambrosie has said that no matter what this does, because the XFL has already said their plans for the 2022 season are currently being paused, which is kind of what I think has caused more of the, the uncomfortableness about what this might mean. I think they need to have a better understanding of where this is going to go before they figure out their business model entirely and what football games will look like there based on where this goes. For the CFL, if, they can kind of move, they're a little more flexible because, they have the model, they have the way they do things, and it'll just be about making some changes to make that fit into whatever comes of this. But regardless of whatever comes of this, it sounds like the earliest it could happen is 2022. Mm-hmm. If we're talking about, I don't think none of us are in favor of mergers or anything like that, but I think some kind of champion versus champion or the odd, games here or there, kind of exhibition showcases, fine. That's cool. But But regardless, so if that's kind of what needs to be built in the XFL schedule, that's fine. But what's eventually going to happen is, regardless of where these lead, the CFL is still planning to play football this coming summer/fall. Yes. We just don't know what it's going to look like, when it's going to look like, where it's going to start. All that kind of stuff is still up in the air, as of course COVID-19 is still a thing. And what's been interesting, though, is there has been sort of some positive developments on that front over the last couple of weeks. Not that anything should be taken for granted at this point, not that we're heading towards any kind of certainty, but they are servings of hope that have been offered up. And that was last week, officials in Manitoba said that they expect basically everyone to be vaccinated by the Bombers' home opener, and more or less Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe backed that up in Saskatchewan as well, saying he expects first shots to start going into the arms of everyone by sometime in June. There's exact timelines for, I think April 5th is we're going to start in their 60s, people in their 60s, and you go every 2 weeks from there for every 10 years, which brings you down to people in their 30s like us in late May, and then you get into everyone 19 plus, they expect by June 14th. So that's kind of the range we're looking at, and around that time is when the CFL season is supposed to start. What a happy coincidence for the CFL all of a sudden.
Well, and as much as we've ripped the league for not having a plan past, oh God, I hope they can get a vaccine real quick, and I'm glad they did, because science rules, as the old Bill Nye show would go. Mm-hmm. I do think now, you mentioned Manitoba, you mentioned here in Saskatchewan, Alberta doesn't give a shit, so they'll rubber stamp anything.
Pretty much, yeah.
And BC said the same thing. BC said, hey, we're looking at a late May, early June timeline to get things going. So now all of a sudden, you have all of your prairie teams with a realistic possibility to have maybe not full capacity, but, 10, 20,000 fans in a game. So, and even I love I love the jokes that you saw on Twitter a little bit this week going around, that even if you just let people that have been vaccinated into Rider games, I still think you'd see 20,000 there. You'd see healthcare workers, you'd see people over the age of 60 that, are going to get done. And I think...
And I mean, in Saskatchewan, that may be motivation for some people to actually go get it.
Well, and that's the dumb thing, and that's the dumb but yet effective thing. And I think one thing, if you look at how the goalposts have moved on this thing, the past year, really, we've gone from our government saying, federally and provincially, okay, Christmas 2021, and then it came out and Trudeau et al. Said, okay, September 2021, and now they've said July 2021, which has become June, which has become May. And the thing I found interesting was, again, Mo saying that we're going to start moving into the general populace here. You can start getting, your shots in a couple weeks. All of a sudden, hearing on the same news sources, if you're above 70 from Saskatchewan, we're giving you a number to call.
Mm-hmm.
Starting
tomorrow. We don't need to get into all the, sort of fumbling and bumbling and gong show that was to get all that done. But anyway.
I mean, exactly. I'm talking. I'm just looking at the happiness of it, because that would be a whole other podcast of me absolutely teeing off, and by the end of it, I'd probably be running for the NDP in Saskatoon and quitting my job. So, I like what I do, and I don't want to be in politics. I swear too much, which is why I'm great for the auto business. But I think the CFL has been saved by the government, and again, tying it briefly back in the XFL partnership, they shouldn't have to be in a position where that's a thing again. So I honestly think you're going to be able to see a large amount of fans at these games. Like, you look at
some point, maybe not week one, there might be a little bit of hesitancy to either start empty and slowly work up to it. I could see that happening. But yeah.
Or I honestly think the timelines that all of these provinces have put out, I don't think it's unreasonable, because if you actually read about a year ago, Ticketmaster and StubHub and all these companies were looking at technology to basically say, okay, you have to prove you had your vaccine before you can buy tickets on our site.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that technology apparently exists now. So I don't think it's a bad idea to simply say, if you're vaccinated, you can come. Which I think organically would get rid of the risk, a huge degree of risk, and B, you could start, letting people in. Because if you're telling me that, and I know myself, the way I feel, I love live sports, and I love going out and drinking beers. Like, I'm like, now that there's finally light at the end of the tunnel, I think I had shut off that part of my brain that, okay, this isn't going to happen. But like, and I've already texted you a couple times about this. Like, the day you and I are both vaccinated, I am coming down. We are hitting up every brewery in Regina, and if we can go to a Riders game, I don't care if I got to sit by myself while you're up in the press box and you got to drive my drunk ass home. I cannot wait. So, I think, as you said, I think it'd be a brilliant move by the teams to simply say, "Listen, you got your shot, you can come."
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's interesting that I think in a way the science has kind of helped the CFL. Like, I think they got really lucky with this idea, and it's still a bit of a risk, but it seems to be a fairly calculated risk of deciding that we can delay the second shot for these vaccines that require a second shot for up to 4 months.
Right.
And if we, in the name of getting the first shot into every person humanly possible quicker, because while it doesn't, give you the full effect of truly, preventing, from catching COVID at its highest effective level, it's basically shown 100% or close to it effectiveness in reducing hospitalization and death. So if you are going to get it, it's going to be very mild. So at the very least, we'll be able to make sure that there isn't stress on hospitals if this thing continues to go around for a little bit while we get everyone the second shot.
Well, and that's it. You're going from, overworked healthcare staff to, I have a really nasty flu or cold for a couple days, right? Which, again, is and that's why I like what Saskatchewan is doing and getting people by age. So I think that was a godsend for the CFL. I don't know if there's been any news back in our home province, and, you said it best. And I am directly stealing your line from before we recorded this, but if you look at the Argonauts, if any team can survive with only and again, as you said, and as I will also say, not being a dick here, but if there's any team that can survive with 8,000 people in the barn, it's the Toronto Argonauts.
Yeah, and the Argos could probably play in front of no one, and they would survive and they would be fine, just because of how strong MLSC is and how relatively low ticket sales are for that team to begin with.
Right.
And I don't think MLSC would be all that mad to be able to write off some Argo losses elsewhere.
Right, and you're certainly right. So, and I mean, even if here's my bold prediction that I'm so bad with takes lately, I almost don't want to say it. I don't want to Fraser curse the COVID vaccine. I could honestly see neutral site games becoming a thing, right? Like, if you could have Hamilton and Montreal, if they had to play a game in Regina, because the vaccine rollout looks like, just strictly based on sheer number of people, that I was texting with my brother-in-law in Calgary yesterday, saying, hey, things are looking optimistic for your wedding in October, because they're telling us that we should all be vaccinated by June. He goes, yeah, that's because your province is the size of Calgary. So, with things looking promising out here, maybe you see some neutral site games.
Maybe. Or at the very least, I think you could run a system where maybe, the Western, you may have to jiggle the schedule a little bit, and they've talked about this would be a flexibility that they've built into it, and it should work out. And the CFL schedule is very regionalized this year to begin with. There isn't as much West-East crossover as there has been in other years.
Right.
So you could, in theory, at least to start the year, you could probably do, okay, out West teams are, doing what they do. The Western teams are playing each other for the first half of the season or first few weeks of the season or whatever. Travel around, do what you need to do, play your games. Meanwhile, say in Ottawa, because Ottawa, for the most part, has had kind of a decent hold on COVID compared to the rest of Ontario at times.
Right.
We're going to bubble up the East because there's 4 teams. That's 2 games a week. Boom. We're just going to bubble up for the next few weeks, and they can make that work in the East.
Right. And at the end of the day, I don't think I felt this optimistic about my chances of being able to eat a 2-foot hot dog, get absolutely blitzed on shitty beer, and probably puke.
It doesn't have to be shitty beer, though.
Oh, right. Mosaic has good beer. Okay. Rewind.
It might not be available for the whole game because it always sells out, but it is available.
Well, and you've seen the speed at which I drink. I might sell it out myself. But yes, my optimism level for drinking good beer, followed by shitty beer, eating a 2-foot-long hot dog, and probably vomiting in your upstairs toilet has never felt better.
Save big on all your back-to-school needs, all in the Baker's app. Get tender USDA Choice untrimmed beef brisket for $2.99 per pound, limit 2. Then get 10 for $10 during our sale on items like Lay's Stacks, Rice-A-Roni, and Sparkling Ice Sparkling Water, all with your card. Shop these deals at your local Baker's, less than 10 miles away. Or tap the screen now to download the Baker's app to save big today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Prices and product availability subject to change. Restrictions apply. See site for details.